Boom! We're back. And I read Gordon Ryan's book, so you don't have to. And I'm sure you're all wondering, Gordon Ryan, the same guy that's the no-gi goat, who spends countless hours a day battling people on Instagram, and 20 hours a day doing jiu-jitsu, is also an author? That's right. I scoured across his website until I could find his book, read it, and then report to everybody else what they're missing out on. And the answer is not that much. Now, as long as you have above a 2nd grade reading level, you should be able to conquer this one by yourself. But in case you're scared of big words, he also included some pretty pictures, mostly of himself, to turn this into a little bit of an adventure. Now, chapters 1 through 7 are pretty sporadic. He starts off by telling us all about himself. He had plenty of money, then he had no money, and eventually he ended up comfortable once again. He mentions that all champions like himself have to grow up in a specific way. He mentions Michael Jordan, Muhammad Ali, Mike Tyson, but I'm not really sure you can compare Mike Tyson's life to his. There's a huge difference between Mike Tyson not having a dad in his life, his mother working in a certain industry, and being put in the system at age 12, compared to your parents lost their money because of family issues. But his family issues taught him one big point. If you want something, you need to make money and work hard for it. Now, I hope those words resonate well with you because my God, you are going to hear them so many times throughout the book, it's going to be ad nauseum. Then he randomly wraps it up by talking about his big win at ADCC 2017. It was definitely a tough division, as he quotes a division of death, as he went up against some real monsters. And just when you were getting interested because you wanted to hear about the juicy jiu-jitsu journey on the back end, we go to a different chapter called Making Excuses is Easy. And honestly, this one is pretty easy to summarize. If you've ever heard a motivational speech or read your own self-help book, you're going to hear the same terms regurgitated multiple times throughout this chapter and every other chapter along the way. He talks about how his daycare instructor taught him how to take responsibility for his actions. His teammates later on in life would help him out with this lesson as well. He would meet up with Gary Tonin, and he talks about how he went to ADCC trials, he lost by heel hook, and it was really hurting his foot. Gary made it a point to remind him that, good, your foot hurts, now you remember how much you suck at jiu-jitsu because of all the pain every time you take a step. This message might resonate really well with some guys out there, and it will completely sway others. In my former gym, this very much was the mindset. If you didn't do some practice, you're a you didn't do this, you're a put. Your arm hurts? Guess what? You're a put. But for other people that read the book, that mindset might throw them off completely. He also loves to end chapters with somewhat inspirational quotes or questions, such as, the ball's in your court. Do you want to be successful, or do you want to keep feeding yourself lies and excuses? If you made a decision, it's time to turn the page. Chapter 3 is a pretty skippable chapter. It's mostly self-help and how to get better when things suck, you have to be persistent, and really you can get these same lessons learned from a 5-minute video on YouTube that's a motivational speech.
There is no tomorrow!
As long as you can remember to be relentless, train with purpose, and face the failure while never stop pushing, you should be able to make it. Now, chapter 4 is called Building a Brand. So we were on this path of self-help and hearing a little bit about his past, and now we're going in a totally different direction as we learn about how to make ourselves a profitable brand for people to invest in. Now, he's good friends with George St. Pierre. He can easily look at his success and try and relate that to himself. And he noticed one key thing. Despite George being the most respectful athlete you can find in MMA, he was still getting hate comments in tons of his posts. Gordon then knew that no matter what he did, people were going to hate on him. So he developed his own persona about being King Gordon, shit-talking tons of people online, and he was going to let the hate flow through him. But the one thing that Gordon has that others may not is he mentions that he can trash talk and back up the trash talk. Unlike athletes out there that he mentions, such as Chael Sonnen, who can talk really well,
Anderson Silva, you absolutely suck!
But they lose when it's game time, he can do both. Then right when you hear details about how to build a brand, we divert back to more self-help with being the best in chapter 5, and you can really skip all of it. But if you actually want to hear a bit of history on Gordon, chapter 6 is a little bit more interesting. Royce Gracie was his original inspiration as be watching the early UFCs, and he wanted to be able to do that to other people. But when his parents didn't have a lot of money because they were getting sued by their grandma, he wasn't able to do classes until age 15. He ended up going to a mall and he took his first class taught by Haz Ibrahim. I'm sure I butchered that name, but he's a brown belt under Ricardo Almeida. And apparently he was quite good because he was smashing all the other kids with basically no experience. So much so that he had to go up against the coach on the first day, who was a 230-pound D1 football player that completely crushed him. But this only inspired Gordon to go farther, continue his training and whatnot. Again, right when the details are getting good, he wants to cut off the story too early. And I'm starting to think he didn't have enough life events, or he didn't tell the writer enough, because he keeps going to the same stories throughout every single chapter, and they all teach him the same lessons. You can't trust anyone. If you want something, work for it, and depend on yourself to have a good life. Now, going into the next part of all these chapters, there's one issue I've noticed. You want to be able to try and create common ground with you and your audience. But saying things such as, I consider myself an apex predator at the top of the food chain with nothing and no one ahead of me. It takes courage and resilience to reach the level I have, the phases I went through, the moments of weakness, and many futile efforts that taught me how to work my way up and who I am today. A gorilla. It may resonate quite well with some people out there, but for other people, it's a little cringe. There's no doubt in my mind that if you want to be the top caliber athlete, you need to think this way. But if you want to sell a book to a large audience, you may need to work on how you relate to the audience. But at least it sounds like he has always had a really solid work effort. You can tell from his jiu-jitsu and the success he's had there, and he talks the same way about his past with his other jobs. But you gotta ask yourself, do you want to be on the page 10 or see yourself at the top? If so, keep watching this video and make sure to subscribe to the channel. Now, this middle section has a lot of stinkers in there. He talks about being happy but never satisfied, the difference between best in the world versus best ever, when life sucks to keep training, which I do agree with, but I think most people already do that, and a little bit of info about his first big win, the more interesting part of the story. He talks about how he won his first big championship at EBI when he was completely unknown and he had to go up against some real monsters to win. He faced off against Rustam and Yuri Samoas, the reigning ADCC gold medalist. But he talked about the mindset where if he didn't win, he was going to continue to be a nobody to everyone out there. And against both of these major opponents, he won in the same way, in overtime. He ended up choking both of them, and they weren't able to hold him, so he easily won and collected a nice $25K championship money award. Unfortunately, his writer, or whoever did this, doesn't use the best descriptions to paint a pretty picture in our minds, so you should just look these up instead. And as long as you keep remembering all those self-help words such as persistence, work hard, trust no one, use hate as your fuel, you should be able to skip the rest and go on to the last part. In chapter 15 then, we go back to brand building and how to make money off the mats. I really think spacing his ideas out too much made this a convoluted mess, but at least the chapters are so short that you can be able to finish this in a couple hours. Now, he talks about the things you could be doing, but he doesn't really tell you how to do it. He says you should be using social media, helping others, find sponsors and endorsements, try coaching or doing privates, and then being a sports representative. But when you try and condense all these sections into like 90 words, there's no way it's really going to help anyone. People need a more concrete path. So by saying this book is going to help them get there is a little naive. And honestly, if you made it this far into the book, you should just be putting it down. He goes on to talk about goals, whether it's short-term or long-term, passive income versus active income like he's a finance guru, and then his personal vices. Save yourself the $10, go watch a motivational video on YouTube, and you'll get 90% of this book's content. Seriously, it's not good. I strongly recommend that you just watch this video, save yourself $10, and go do something else with your life.